Hello Sword Fam, welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today I'm going to be doing a tournament recap of my performance at the Helsinki Longsword Open cutting tournament in January 2023. There were a total of 19 competitors. I had placed 4th overall, losing out to T-School, Eetu Rofalinen, and Kristian, who were incredible to compete with. So, let's take a look at how I did. This tournament was organized and run by Sean Franklin, who you can see sitting at the table on the right-hand side. The first round consisted of 3 different feats. The first one you're going to see here will consist of 6 cuts total, 3 descending true edge cuts from my right, 3 descending true edge cuts from my left, but they all have to be done on a single mat. They can be separated and they will be scored individually, but when you only have 6 cuts to make up as many points as possible, you have to be really accurate and make sure you nail every single one. You'll notice some colored cones on the desk that Sean is sitting at. Those color cones are used to identify for me as the competitor what the score was roughly for my cut. You'll notice that there's a blue cone, a green or yellow cone, and a red cone. The blue cone is used to indicate a good cut with no deductions. The yellow or green cone is used to indicate deductions have been applied. The orangey red cone is used to indicate a failed cut and no points will be awarded for that cut. So you'll see in this video that every time I do a cut, Sean will use a cone to indicate the points that I have been given. He'll also use a white cone here to indicate that I can begin when ready. From the starting line, I begin my first cut. Looks good. Sean says there's a minor deduction. Second cut coming in. Also managed to do that. That looks good. Third, coming in there. That one looks good. Sean gives it an okay. I move on to my left side here. I can already see the deduction. Yep. Sean said nope. Same thing, and deduction there. I knew it. Third one, not bad. And a deduction. My big deductions there were planting my feet before I actually swung for my cut. Moving immediately to the next part, which will be 2 rising cuts from either side using the true edge. Same points are going to be indicated here. I'm going to start with my cross side. The cut looks good, but I planted before, so yep, there's a deduction. I'm going to try that again more fluid. Sean thinks it's good. He gives me the blue cone. I'm going to do the same thing. I planted before cutting, and I knew it. That piece flew a little bit, but I got partial points, that's good. Last one, it's a little bit of mat. Got it, good. That should be minor deductions. The deductions were almost a tactical decision. Because I only had 4 cuts that I could gain points on, I wanted to make sure that I was able to get every single cut without fail. So I chose to step before I cut so that I had a good foundation and a good base to deliver my cut. So this was strategic, and it actually paid off because the points that I gained in this first 2 parts of round 1 is what really set me ahead of the pack for the rest of the event. The last task for round 1 was not on tatami but on paper, which you can see here. I have to do a slow lightning cut. The first cut is descending from my right side, the second cut is ascending from my left side, and then the third cut is descending from my right side. I then have to do this again, starting from my left side instead of my right side. So it's like a lightning pattern, but I have to do it starting from my dominant and starting from my non-dominant side. I was really not sure about this feat because the paper that they were using in Helsinki was completely different. I've done paper cutting before, I feel extremely confident about it, and you can see that I was able to do this feat with ease at home. It's called a slow lightning cut because you can wait up to 5 seconds to allow the paper to settle, which I really had to do for this feat. My first cut is fine, but you can see how much the paper moves. I'm literally counting. and then I rip it. So that's where I only get points for one of the 3 cuts. This was very frustrating. Again, I was confident about this feat, but when I found out the paper was much lighter and much thinner, then I realized I was in trouble. So now I have to attempt the same pattern again, but from my left side. First cut is good. Second, not so good, but I'm determined to get points for that third and last cut. So I wasn't successful here, but I did manage to get some partial points. And overall, my round score was pretty decent for round 1. Looking at the scores after round 1 was concluded, I was pretty happy with myself. Being 2 points behind someone like Kristian was pretty freaking cool. I was mostly just grateful to be in the top 10, which meant that I was not going to be eliminated, and I was going to be allowed to move on to round 2. Round 2 is referred to as reactive cutting, sometimes called semaphores. There's going to be a screen that you can see in front of Sean, and it's going to indicate cuts to me. The cuts are either my left or right descending true edge, or my left or right rising true edge. Now, not only will the screen indicate which cut I need to do, but it will tell me which mat I need to do it on. You can see there are 2 tatami mats a good distance away from me. I do not know the pattern beforehand, and it is expected that I will start and stop in that box in the back. I was so proud of that first cut. It was awesome. I shouldn't have turned my back to run backwards, but no big deal. Next one is going to come up here. Another rising cut. These can be really difficult on the same mat because if you ever just pull the mat off of the stand, you lose that mat for the rest of the round and you will not gain points. Finally, one on that side with a descending cut, trying not to turn my back as I go back to my square. This is a very stressful thing. You have to read the cues, make the cut, move. It's very dynamic. Again, I'm being very strategic in planting my foot before I cut because I want stability. I don't want to lose my footwork. So far I'm doing actually really well. There's some minor deductions. Again, that's probably because I'm planting my foot. None of my tatami pieces are flying too far away. It seems that it was purposefully done, this pattern, to have a significant amount of rising cuts on one and descending cuts on the other mat. It did mess up a few people. As you can see, it starts to get more difficult when you have less mat. Not knowing the pattern either doesn't really make it any easier to try and figure out how to conserve your tatami. But I'm managing, keeping it up. I'm mostly trying to pace myself and remember I don't have to rush. There's actually a lot of time in between each cut. You can see that I made that cut, but it fails because I took the tatami off the stand. So now every time a cut is indicated for that mat, I have to still do it, but I will not get points for it. The idea is that it wants me to be dynamic. I'm still supposed to be moving and going through the motions as if I had a mat, even though I will not be given any points for it. And this can definitely hurt. You can see how many cuts I'm losing out on in the pattern, so I need to make up for it elsewhere, which means that every cut I get on this last tatami needs to be good. So let's see if I can pull it off. Gonna go ahead and just cut that air. It does help to do that though, because then it just sets you in the pace. You can just kind of keep rolling and you don't get thrown off. And that was the last cut of that pattern. I felt immensely bad for basically yeeting a mat towards the director, but not a bad way to go out overall, and my performance here was pretty strong. It ended up doing pretty good for the points, which I will show you here. Losing that other tatami mat definitely hurt my score. You can see it only brought me into 5th, but still a pretty good overall performance when you look at the rest of the competitors. Now, in order to move on to finals, they only take the top 4. However, in order to determine the top 4, they actually use the cumulative scores of round 1 and round 2. Which meant that with my cumulative score, I ended up coming in 4th, and that pushed me through to finals. Now, I want to talk about this for just a second, because going into HLO, I didn't really have high expectations. Not that I didn't think I could do well, but I knew that competing against some of these big name guys was going to be really tough. So I figured if I could get past round 1 with a decent score, I'd be really happy with myself. But to be able to make it into finals with Feats, Eetu, and Kristian was mind-blowing. And I knew going into it that this was going to be an extremely difficult uphill battle for me to beat any of the 3 of them. I was still going to try my best, but I had to face the reality that I hadn't really spent a lot of time preparing for the finals feats because I didn't even expect to get into finals. And sure enough, it showed when I went to go up there and do the feats. Well, you'll see. I'll let Sean explain the feats.
Okay, everyone, we will now start with the final for the cutting competition. I will now give the word to the one and only John Franklin. Hello.
Okay, just a brief explanation of what we're doing, all right? So over here, all right, we're going to be doing what's called, there's a counter rotation. So normally when we cut, we want to rotate with the cut because that makes all our mechanics line up better. Now I'm saying you can't do that. So you have to rotate away from the cut, the opposite of where you would normally move your feet, all right? So they're going to be doing all Obers, Unters, Verhaus using this counter rotation mechanic, okay? And then we have a number of deductions for how the pieces fly, for form and whatnot. I'll be holding up a cone, because I didn't get the flags here. For deduction, blue is no deduction. Yellow is some deductions, so sometimes there's form deduction. Oh, sorry, for this one, there's the no form deductions. It'll basically just be based on the cut quality, or if they didn't actually counter rotate. Here we'll be cutting the paper with this bitter short, all right? So they'll be doing Verhaus. They have 10 seconds to do as many as they can, which may not actually be that many. This is very difficult. And then again, multiple attempts. I'll take 4 attempts. I'll take the 2 best scores. All right. And over here, as they're cutting, what's going to happen is they will be signaling an opening. All right. Then they will have to parry that opening, cut back, and parry.
Okay, those sound pretty difficult, and they absolutely were. There was nothing about this that I had any advantage in at all. And unfortunately, I had to go first because I was at the bottom, and Feats, as the number 1 seed, was able to choose if he wanted to go first or wanted to go last. And of course, he wanted to go last, so I had to go first, which meant I didn't even have any of the advantage to watch how these other guys figured it out or did it. I just had to go up there, wing it, and, well, hope for the best. So here we go. I don't often get nervous anymore for cutting tournaments, but this time I was really nervous. This feat went against everything I'd ever known about cutting. I was always taught to rotate my body with the direction of my cut, and I don't necessarily have the upper body strength to do it any other way. So this was really, really hard. This first cut just broke my brain. I could not wrap my head around turning my hips in the opposite direction of my cut. It just really weirded me out. But I figured maybe I could get it. I just needed to swing more, maybe? Not sure. But I got it. The problem here is that I took off way too much mat, and I didn't have enough mat to work with for the rest of my cuts. Here I am trying to figure out how I want to do the next one. I was always confused about the step and the direction to indicate, but somehow I managed, kind of. The nerves start setting in as I'm realizing I'm gonna have to figure out how to do some other cuts here, and the mat's not really cooperating either. Trying to explain to Sean how I want to do it and if it actually works for his rules. You can see me struggling. My mind, the gears are just turning so much. Can I do it? No, not at all. It was definitely hard for me to get up there in front of a bunch of people and feel like I didn't know what I was doing. Fortunately for this feat, I was given a respike, so I was able to get my mat back up there, but again, I was really struggling. Hey, it cut. Kind of. But, okay. And because I used my one respike, I couldn't reset the mat, and from here, I just have to move on to the paper cutting feat. So knowing that the paper was nothing like what I had trained on at home, I knew I was going to struggle a lot with this feat. I can do a Zwerchau, Oberhau, Unterhau, all of these with a blunt sword, no problem at home on the paper that I'm used to. But as you can see, I'm going to struggle heavily using this sword and this paper. Again, this is a fetter, it is blunt, so I don't even have a sharp edge to rely on here. Look at that rip. Yep. I'm trying to figure out how I'm gonna calibrate this. Maybe I need to do this a little bit more on the weak of the blade so I can get a little bit more tip rotation through it. Maybe I need to go faster. Maybe I need to be on a bit of an angle. My brain was just working overtime. Getting more frustrated. I'll be honest, it really sucks to fail, but it really sucks when you can't cut paper. Like, it's just paper, you know? Attempt number 3, complete fail. At this point, I kind of knew I wasn't gonna make it through to a medal. I knew if any of those guys just got one of those cuts on this feat, they'd be in. And now I just kind of decided to just go with the flow. Nope. All right, on to the next one. So this next feat was also really, really difficult for me. This is the parry cut, parry with the dowel, and you can see how short that dowel or stave is, and this also broke my brain. These 3 feats were just total kryptonite for me. It broke my brain because all I could think about was safety, and I didn't want to cut this poor guy, and my brain just decided that he was too close for me to cut, and I really struggled with the idea of somebody near me or near the tatami when I was cutting. So you can see, the first one I totally just whiff. I don't even hit the mat because I'm too afraid to get any closer to him. And I just, oof. Yep, and you can see I was too far away to make that cut work as well because I was just too scared to get really close, and yep. Yeah. Watching the video back, I actually think there was a lot of space and it probably would have been totally fine, but being there in the moment, I was just unable to get over the fact that I felt like he was way too close. And like I said, in the video you can actually see there's a lot of space and I probably would have been fine, but my training it just overrode that ability, and I finally got one cut, but at that point it was a little too late. I knew I wasn't making up the points, but you know, next time. And I've seen this feat done safely before. In fact, it was done recently in another cutting tournament, but the staff or the dowel was probably twice the length of that, and I think that would have helped a lot for me. But again, I have no way to train this either. I'm not really comfortable having my students swing something at me while I have a sharp and they're near the tatami or near the sharp itself. Like it really was a very difficult feat for me overall, so it's something I can work on next time. So despite the fact that finals wasn't really a strong showing for me, I feel like this cutting tournament was probably one of my best performances overall, so I have absolutely no regrets. And I had an incredible time in Finland, and everybody was super welcoming, and all the guys that I cut with were extremely friendly, and I felt like we all developed a really awesome bond, just hanging out, watching each other cut, cheering each other on, sharing ideas and strategies. It really felt like I was super welcome to be there, and being able to stand there at finals amongst these other guys was just such an incredible moment. And if nothing else, it really motivates me to keep pushing, keep training, and trying to do better. If I can make it, I would definitely go back to HLO to compete in cutting again next year, and I'm really looking forward to the opportunities that I'll have to cut again in the future. And as always, friends, you guys humble me with your support and kind words, so thank you very much. And especially thank you to my patrons on Patreon. And lastly, I would like to thank the sponsor for this video, Mike Edelson, who is the author of Cutting with the Medieval Sword. If you're interested in pursuing cutting with medieval swords, I highly recommend this book for any beginner.